Hi, this is Mike McCrease and welcome once again to Advanced Photoshop. And this time we are going to explore different techniques in making selections. Selections are absolutely paramount in Photoshop, and there's a number of different ways to do that. I'm going to show you some of the most effective ways to work with selections in Photoshop, and I'll also point out some tools that are obsolete and probably shouldn't be used. There's a few files that you'll want to download from Blackboard. 3 pictures, one called At the Beach, one called Horseback, and one called Sweater. And we're going to take those one by one and explore different selection techniques. Let's go ahead and open up the one called At the Beach. And you can see it's a picture of a guy standing on the beach, crashing waves in the background, and he's doing a little bit of a yoga pose. And what we're going to do is extract him from the background. But before we get into that, let's just talk about some of the basic selection tools. Up here at the top of our toolbar, you've got a series of selection tools, and as you know, you can click and hold down over any of those tools that have a little black triangle in the lower right hand corner, and you see that there are hidden tools beneath it. So let's take a look at just the rectangular marquee tool and the elliptical marquee tool. And of course, keyboard shortcut is right over here, which is M. And if you want to scroll through those hidden tools, you can just press Shift plus the keyboard shortcut. So if I press Shift M, you see that it toggles between the elliptical marquee tool and the rectangular marquee tool. And of course, when I click and drag, we get a selected area outlined by the marching ants. Now up here at the top, you see that you have different options. By default, it is set for new selection, but you've also got add to selection, subtract from selection, and intersect with selection, and you've also got feathering options. Let's just take these one by one. If I want to add to a selection, I can click on this button right here, and when I click and drag another selection, it combines the two together. I'll undo that. But an easier way to do that is just use the keyboard shortcut. Let's go back to the regular view. And if I hold down the Shift key, you see the little plus sign appears next to my cursor, letting me know that I can then add to this existing selection. So I'm going to click and drag over it, and it adds to that. I'll undo that. And then next I'm going to hold down the alternate key. And the alternate key, when you hold that down, you'll see that the little minus sign appears, and you'll see that the subtract from selection option is featured in the top of our options bar. So we click and drag like this, and it subtracts from that selection. I'll undo that. For our intersect option, there is no keyboard shortcut for that. So let's click on that, and then I'll click and drag a selection on top of that. And you see the intersection of those two selections is then the selected area. I'll go back to my new selection tool, and I'll move the cursor inside the selection, and you see that it turns into a little arrow with a little selection icon. That means that I can move that selection anywhere I want to at this time. If I go to my Move tool and move the cursor inside, you see the little scissors letting me know that I'm going to cut it out if I click and drag at this point. And you see how it cuts it out. I'll undo that and deselect. Now let's talk about our feathering options here. I'm going back to my rectangular marquee tool, and my feather options here, let's just set that for, it'll be kind of dramatic. We'll set it at 20 pixels. And what feathering does is it applies a blur to the selected area. So now I'm going to click and drag, and you see the corners are kind of rounded. That's because the selection area is blurred. And now if I go to my Move tool and cut that out, you can see the blurred selection where it was removed. So feathering makes a nice transition between your selected edges, and it's very useful. Let's move that back, and I'll deselect. And of course, to deselect, I just press Control D. Let's take a look at our select menu here at the top. Maybe I should let's just click this select menu, and if I choose select all or Command or Control A, that selects everything. Of course, the keyboard shortcut's what we want to remember. So Command or Control A to select all. To deselect, it's Control D or Command D on the Macintosh. And another handy one is inverse, which is Shift Control I. Let's do this. Let's deselect, and I'll just make a simple selection right here. And let me set my feathering back to 0 here. Now I'll make my selection, and I'll choose Select and Inverse or Shift Control Command I, and now everything outside of that initial area is selected. So if I move it at this point, we're moving the background and leaving the selected area alone. So it's very often that you will want to invert your selection. Let's go back to our original selection here. And another option that we've got is transform selection. And the transform selection works just like the free transform tool does for selected pixels, except here we're just working with our selection. So I can rotate and move the selection around. I can move the center point right here. I'll move it up to the corner, and now when I rotate, it's going to pivot from that point right there. And then when I press return, you see that my selection is transformed. At that point, then I can choose to edit it as I see fit. Now some of the other menu items, there's reselect, which allows you to reselect a previously selected area. Color range we'll get into in a minute. Refine edge we'll get into later. We've also got modify, where you can expand or contract your selection. I may want to expand this. Let's say, again, we'll be dramatic here. I'll set it at 20 pixels and click OK, and now my selection is expanded out 20 pixels. Okay, let's deselect that, and let's talk about a couple of the other tools. Let's go to our lasso tool, L for lasso, and the lasso tool, just the basic lasso tool, has been with us since Photoshop first debuted, and it allows you to very quickly select a large area. And of course you can hold down the Shift key to add to a selected area, or the alternate key to remove from a selected area. The polygonal lasso tool is underneath that. I find that rather handy, and it makes polygonal selections. Just like that. And then underneath that is the magnetic lasso. The magnetic lasso is pretty obsolete. I'm not going to show you how to use this. You can explore that in the help files on your own if you want to. But it's an older selection tool, and it's really just not used anymore since the advent of the quick selection tool. And the quick selection tool is a fantastic innovation, because it pretty much replaces the magnetic lasso. It makes very quick selections, hence its name. And you have different brush sizes for that. And for example, if I want to make a selection of this fellow on the beach here, I can just click and drag over very quickly, and he is selected. Just like that, he's selected. And then if I want to cut that out, there. So quick and easy selections. Let's undo that and deselect. Now underneath the quick selection tool is the magic wand tool. Magic wand tool again is another tool that's been around since the beginning of Photoshop. It's obsolete. I don't really recommend using it. It does a horrible job of making selections. So let's not even go into that. We're going to spend most of our time working with the quick selection tool. Okay, so our goal here is to extract the man on the beach from the background. Maybe this is going to be for a magazine article and we don't want the background in there, or maybe we want to just make some adjustments to one part of it. Or for example, I'd like to bring out some more of the detail of the waves in the background. So I'm going to go to my quick selection tool and I can just press W to get to that. And I'm going to select that background. Just do a quick selection over that. And notice too that you can change your brush size just by pressing the left and right bracket keys on your keyboard. And you want to make certain that the crosshairs don't touch the figure. We're going to click in these areas right there and it selects that. You'll also notice that up in the top of the picture, his hand did not get completely selected. So let me just zoom in up there. By default, when you made your initial selection in your options bar, it goes to the Add to Selection option. You've also got a Subtract from Selection. Also, one thing I forgot to tell you, always, let's just deselect this. One thing I forgot to tell you, when you use the quick selection tool, always make certain that the auto enhance feature is turned on your options bar. Otherwise you're going to have an absolute nightmare on your hands. It just does not do a good job of selecting if it's not on. So once again, I'm going to go to my quick selection tool, select the background very quickly, just like that. It's selected. Zoom in on that hand and I will hold down the option key to subtract from the selection, and moving my cursor just inside that hand, I can fine-tune that selection. Now you may see when you zoom in that there are some other areas that need some fine-tuning, like this part of his hand over here. Let's get that. Oops, I meant to hold down the alternate key or the option key. I did not do that, so I'm going to remove this part of his arm from that selection. Let's make certain that everything looks good everywhere else. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, so let's go back to Fit in Window. And at this point here, I'm going to create an adjustment layer. Let's open up my Layers panel here. I'll pull that out so we can see a little bit better. At the bottom, we're going to click on the Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer button, and I will choose Curves because I want to increase the darkness and the contrast in that background, and I'm going to use curves to do that. Let me stop just for a second. Oftentimes I'll use levels to adjust brightness and contrast. Curves gives me a little more flexibility. Levels is easier to use. But don't use the brightness and contrast option, because when you use brightness and contrast adjustment, it adjusts all the pixels equally, and we don't want to do that. So don't use that. There's maybe, I can't think of a single situation when I would want to use this. There might be one or two in your lifetime, but not often. So let's go to curves and get a little bit experience with that. Now what I can do with the curves, you get this rather confusing little box, but you also get this histogram here, which shows you all the values in your selected area. If I were to go to my Layers panel, you'll see that because I made a selection, when I created that adjustment layer, it automatically created a mask for me, and whatever is black is masked off. So the what we're seeing on our Curves panel is just the information from the background area, and we see that these are my shadows, these are my midtones, and these are my highlights, and we don't really have any shadows there. I am going to drag this shadow slider in a little bit just to make that a bit darker. Don't want to make it too dark. Let's make it darker like that. And then I'm going to click and drag up or down on this curve, and that sets an anchor point right there. And I can click and drag that anchor point, and I can bring my brightness down. I'm going to move off to the side here just so you can see what's going on over on the right hand side, because it's affecting these areas differently. Now I can click and add another anchor point and create an S-curve. And this is how we usually control our contrast, is with an S-curve. If I don't like the results, I can select one of those anchor points and press my delete key, and it's gone. And I can just darken that a little bit like that, which I think is going to be fine for me. I like the way that background looks. But one thing I don't like is that it made this part of the picture too dark. So, over into my Layers panel, I will go to my paintbrush, and I'll switch to black paint and use a large soft edge brush, and I'm going to set my opacity at about 20% or so, and I will paint over that area on the mask to bring that lightness back in there, because it just got a little too dark for us. And you can see how it updates my mask over here on my thumbnail. So this is before, there's after. Okay, let's say that we wanted to get rid of the background altogether. In that case, I would simply, well, let me make a copy of my background layer first. I'll go to that background layer and press Control or Command J and drag that to the top of my layer stack, and I'll turn the original layer off just so that it's not in the way there. And again, if I want to remove the background, I could erase it or I could mask it. Masking is the preferred method because it is non-destructive editing. In other words, it preserves the original pixels. There's not many times when you want to use the eraser tool, but there may be some, so we'll discuss that now, and then we'll go back into masking. So let's say I wanted to erase this background. I could go to my eraser tool right here, and you can click and drag, and just like painting in reverse, and you can remove parts. Let's undo that. I could use the background eraser tool, which is pretty handy, and I can move my cursor over the edge of my figure, making certain that the crosshairs don't touch the figure, and I can click and drag, and you see that it erases the background. It detects what is the figure and what is the background. Looks like it missed a part there, so let me try that again. And it can erase this background colors for you. Let's undo that. And then our last eraser tool is the magic eraser tool, and it's sort of like a paint bucket in reverse. It selects a color range and will get rid of pixels in that area. So, but you don't want to do this unless you are working with a mask, because once these pixels are erased, they're gone forever, and that's not what we want to do. So, let's go back to extracting this figure. Let's go to our quick selection tool, and there we go. And we're going to select the figure just like this. We've got it selected. And at the bottom of my layers panel, I'm going to click on the mask button to create a mask, and it masks it off. Now, one of the problems that you may have is when you mask off an area, it oftentimes looks like you cut it out with a pair of scissors and just glued it on a different background. Then it looks really, really bad. So what we're going to do is feather these edges a little bit. Let's go to our Properties panel, and here we have our feathering option. I'm just going to set that feathering to 1 pixel. This is a fairly low resolution image, but even if you've got a high resolution image, usually 1 or 2 pixels is all you need to feather it, and that's going to soften those edges so that it doesn't look like it has been cut out and pasted on there. So now our edge is a little bit softer. So let's save that and close it. Next, let's open up the one called Sweater. Let's say that you are a graphic designer and you are working on a catalog for this company, and this company produces these sweaters, and maybe these sweaters come in a variety of different colors, and you want to illustrate that in your catalog. So what we're going to do is change the color of the woman's sweater without changing any of the other colors in the picture, and we're going to use the color range command to help us to do that. And the color range command selects a specified color or color range within an existing selection. So let's go to our select menu at the top and choose color range. And this dialog opens up, and it shows you, I think by default your fuzziness is set to 40. I'll just go ahead and put it back down to there. And you should see like just kind of an image of your figure there. And you've got an eyedropper. Your cursor turns into an eyedropper. And I can click on any part of that image and select it. If I want to change the color of her lips, I just click on the lips, and you see that whatever is white there, that is the selected part of the image. Again, I want to select her sweater, so I'm going to click on that, and you see that some of the blue pixels are selected. I'll go to the Add to Sample cursor and click on other parts of the sweater, either in this preview or on the image itself, and add those values, the range of blue, to the selection. Whatever is white is going to be selected when I'm finished here. So I want to get as much of this as possible. That's pretty good. Didn't get everything, so I'm going to adjust my fuzziness, and this fuzziness kind of expands that. So I'm going to bring that out like that until my sweater turns white. Now I want to make certain that I don't get much, if any, of the other picture showing up, like her pants are now starting to show in. I'm going to pull that back like this. So in my case here, I'm setting the fuzziness to 72, and then I will click on OK. And you see that anything within that range of colors has been selected. Now you might also see that there are some areas of the picture that were not selected. So I'll go to my selection tool. Let me zoom in here so you can see a little bit better. And there's actually quite a few pixels there that were not selected. So I'll just add those to my selection. I can just go to the elliptical marquee tool and hold down the shift key and just drag a marquee over those pixels to bring them into that selection. So let's do that. I want to make certain that all those blue pixels are selected and none of the others. I missed a bunch of them there. And of course I can use the lasso tool or any of my selection tools, just as long as you hold down the shift key when you select them to add them to the existing selection. And then there's a few parts that we don't want selected, such as that blue bead on her bracelet. So I'm going to go to my, I think what I'll probably do is go to the elliptical marquee tool here. We're going to hold down the alternate key, and I'll just move up here to the top left and click and drag over that bead, and that removes that from the selection. There's a little bit of blue down there and some right there. A little bit here that we missed. And let's see where else we may have missed. Earrings. We don't want to change the color of our earrings. So once again, I'm going to hold down the alternate key with any of my selection tools and remove those pixels from the selected area. Okay, so now my sweater is selected. I'm going to go to my Layers panel, and I'm going to click on the Adjustment Layer button, and I'm going to choose Hue and Saturation. And I'll just take my hue slider and drag that over into the green section to change the color from blue to green, or you can choose any color you want. I'll choose green. The green looks a little unnatural, so I'm going to take the saturation slider. The saturation is the intensity of the color, and I'll bring that down to where it looks about right. In my case here, about a -45. Over my Layers panel, you'll see that a mask was created so that it's only affecting the sweater pixels. Whatever's white is the part that's being adjusted. So we'll save this and close that one. Now we're going to do something a little more challenging. So let's open up the horseback picture. In this case here, we want to extract the girl on the horse from the background. And what's challenging about this is that we've got parts of the girl's hair and the horse's tail and mane that kind of commingle with the background area. And that is going to be a bit of a trick, but we're going to be using the Refine Edge command to help us to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do, let me zoom out here a little bit. I'm going to go to my Quick Selection tool, and I'm going to very quickly select in the background area just like that. I'm going to click in this negative space between the horse's legs and make certain that's selected, also between the feet at the bottom. Let's zoom in so you can see a little bit better. I'll get this space right in here, right in there. I'll quickly get the space between the girl and the horse. Drop my brush size down a little bit and just kind of get a portion of this part here just above the saddle. Just a really basic selection here is what we're after. Nothing really detailed. Next, I'll create a mask. So in my Layers panel, we'll just click on the Mask button. And then I'll go to my Properties panel. And in the Properties panel, I'll click on Invert. And that's going to invert my mask selection so that the girl is now extracted from the background. But the resulting image is not very pleasing. Again, it looks like she's been cut out with scissors and glued on the background, and you see there's parts of the image that didn't come through. So we're going to click on this little button that says Mask Edge. And this panel, this window, will open up. Now I'm going to press F on my keyboard repeatedly, and that's going to toggle through different ways of seeing my selected area. You can click this little drop-down menu and see those different areas with their keyboard shortcuts. Let's choose black on white, or just press K on your keyboard. I'll explain a few of these options here, some of which we will use on this image and some of them we won't. Let's click on the Show Radius option here at the top, and you see that your image disappears. And I'm going to go down to the radius slider underneath that, and I'm going to drag that in, and as soon as I do, the edge of the selected area appears, and you can set that to its greater or narrower. But what this does, it defines a transition area, and the transition area is the part of the image that is where, for example, the hair, where it blends in with the background. That's a transition area. Parts of this image are transitional and parts of them are not. Now in this case here, I'm going to turn that show radius off, and I'm just going to pull this radius back down to 0. I don't need that here. Now to show you what's another option here is I can take this radius slider and pull that out, and you see more and more edge detail appear. But you can also see that we're picking up some of the pixels of the background area. So again, I'm just going to pull that down, and I think I'm going to leave that set at right about 2 pixels, give or take. So setting the radius at 2 pixels. And that's going to give me just a 2 pixel blur on the edge. Actually, let's set that back to 1, because this is a fairly low resolution image, and I think 1 pixel radius would be fine. And again, what that's doing is we're defining the transition area, and parts of the horse are really nice and sharp edge, and parts of them are not. So we're going to set that at 1 pixel radius. Next, I'll go to my Refine Radius tool, and if you click it, you'll see that there is a Refine Radius tool and an Erase Refinements tool, and the keyboard shortcut is E. I'm going to choose the Refine Radius tool. Let me move this out of the way for right now. Zoom in here a little bit. And I'm going to use a fairly large brush, and I'm going to paint over this part of the image where the girl's hair was mixing with the background of the ocean. And you can see how much hair in that transition area is picked up. Now it also picked up parts of her waist, which we don't want. So I'll press Shift E and click inside the figure where you see those gray parts, and that's going to remove those. I'll do the same thing on this ocean part back there, and that's going to remove those. Over her forehead, where we see this kind of grayish area here, that's part of the refinement we want to remove. Right over here, there's some more gray. Now let's move over to the horse's mane, and we're going to, oops, wrong tool there. Let's go press Shift E and go back to the edge detection tool, and we will bring in the horse's mane there. Press Shift E again to remove those refinements where there is no mane. Down here at the bottom, we're going to go press Shift E again. Again, we're going back to our edge refinement brush, and you see your cursor turns into a plus sign there, and we're going to paint over the reins of the horse to pick that up. I'm just taking a look around the entire image here to see areas that need to be worked on. We see that the tail of the horse needs quite a bit of work, so I will paint over that, and you can see how it's picking up all the details in the hair. Again, it's picking up some parts of the background, which I don't want, so I'm switching to my Erase Refinement tool by pressing Shift E, and we'll drag over those areas. If I go too far, I just go back and add them back in. So that's looking pretty good. Now there's a part over here on the saddle where we see some gray on the inside. We're going to paint over that because that should be a nice sharp edge. So we're going to take a tour all around the image. And you're not going to get this right the first time, I can promise you that. So you'll have to repeat this a few times. But it's looking pretty good here. I like the way that's looking. Now I'm pressing B on my keyboard just to show it against a black background. And this is where we can see areas that need some refinement. I press Shift E to go back to my Edge Refinement tool. And anywhere there is white, that's the part of the ocean in the background, I'll click on that. And that's going to remove it. Like over here against her stomach. Let's get that. And right there. And right here. Get all these areas. So those white pixels are the background that we're trying to remove. Now I can press W on my keyboard to see what it looks like against a white background. Now there's another option on my Refine Mask panel, and that is the Decontaminate Colors. I'll click on that. And what this does is it in those transitional areas where it's part of the pixels are the background and part of them are the girl's hair, it's going to take the color of the girl's hair, and it's going to push them out into those areas. Let me see if I can't zoom in here real quick and show you what we mean. Okay, turn on Decontaminate Colors and click and drag the slider off to the right, and you can see how it's pushing the color of her hair out into that transitional area. And again, you can press B on your keyboard to see the effect against a dark background. Press W to see it against a white background. Now before we click OK, we want to take another tour around the picture. Take a look at the horse's tail there. And with the Erase Refinements tool active here, I'm just painting over the horse's tail a little bit because it looked like we're picking up some background pixels there, which I didn't want to get. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So to finish it up, down at the bottom, I've got my output options. I'm going to choose output to new layer with layer mask, but you can see that there's other options such as output to a new document or new document with layer mask. But I'll just choose new document, or excuse me, new layer with layer mask and click OK. Then over in my layers panel, here's my new layer with the layer mask. And if I ever wanted to see those original pixels, I can right click and choose disable layer mask. So that is before and that's after. So complete all three of those and send those to me on Blackboard. In the future, we'll show you how to use the pen tool to make accurate selections.